and welcome to our Surviving the Storm special. I'm Max Defender 8 Chief Meteorologist and Climate Specialist Jeff BERARDELLI. We are here on Key Biscayne, Florida's southernmost barrier island, and a true tropical paradise. Key Biscayne's southern tip is home to Bill Baggs Cape Florida State Park, brimming with nature, dazzling ocean views, and encircled by sandy white beaches. A historic lighthouse completes the picture. But as beautiful and peaceful as it is here today, it was a drastically different story 30 years ago. That's when Hurricane Andrew, one of the most destructive storms to hit the state, forced the people in this part of South Florida to experience a living nightmare. Andrew caught many by surprise, especially those who thought they'd experienced a hurricane before. Yet despite this horror, Andrew left us with valuable lessons on surviving the storm. Homestead, Florida, a quiet city just south of Miami that sprang up a century ago along the East Coast Railway. Yet most of the homes here are less than 30 years old because of one catastrophic event.
We're about 15 minutes away from supposedly the worst part.
Andrew.
The wind is whipping up. The surf is just coming right across the front of our car.
One of the most destructive storms in U.S. history. Andrew began as a tropical depression over the eastern Atlantic, August 16, 1992. A week later, it had intensified to a Category 5 storm. Weakening slightly over the Bahamas, it strengthened again before barreling through Biscayne Bay and laying waste to Homestead in the overnight hours of the 24th. Andrew destroyed or greatly damaged nearly every structure in its path.
There is not a roof to be found on probably every house in this neighborhood. Many of these people woke up early this morning to glass breaking, the roofs caving down on top of them.
Thousands underestimated the storm's strength. Foregoing shelters, they rode out Andrew at home. It was a gamble that tragically did not pay off.
The kids were saying, "Mommy, what happened? Why is God doing this to us?" And my husband was holding the roof. The father-in-law was holding the roof. Everything fell off.
Andrew destroyed more than 65,000 homes, damaged 124,000 others, caused $27 billion in damage, and cost 65 people their lives. Today, Florida's population is 22 million, nearly twice what it was in Andrew's time. Many are new to Florida and hurricanes, and that's a problem.
I always tell people in Florida, most of you have never really been through a major hurricane.
It's staggering the number of people that have moved to the area as the cities have grown with time. But just because it hasn't happened in the past doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. So you got to be ready. You have to prepare as if you're going to be hit every single year.
Good advice supported by the voices of experience. Forecasters are anticipating another active Atlantic hurricane season. Colorado State University expects we will see a total of 19 named storms, 9 of which will become hurricanes, and of those, 4 will become major hurricanes. NOAA forecasters are expecting 14 to 21 named Atlantic storms, 6 to 10 which could become hurricanes, and 3 to 6 developing into major hurricanes. Atmospheric scientists are always looking for new ways to study tropical storms and hurricanes. Now, a new and unusual floating drone can venture into the middle of the storm to find out how a hurricane draws its energy from the sea. Meteorologist Amanda Holly has more on sail drones.
For the very first time, we can collect data from the ocean surface during a hurricane. These sail drones are fully autonomous as they travel inside a tropical cyclone. And because they're powered by wind and solar, they can stay out for months at a time. The hope here is to use this collected data to help us better predict when a tropical system will rapidly intensify.
What you're getting from the sail drone is going to be not just the atmosphere, but the ocean underneath.
Dr. Michael Brennan is a hurricane specialist at the National Hurricane Center. He says there is still a lot to learn.
Any kind of data you can collect in that sort of right at the surface environment is really helpful in terms of just understanding what the storm's doing and how it's going to evolve.
It really does something that we haven't been able to do before.
Dr. Greg Foltz, an oceanographer at NOAA, says the sail drone is a sophisticated laboratory that can go where nothing else can and survive.
And we showed that last hurricane season, we did it for the first time, sending one of these into a Category 4 hurricane, and it survived and gave us really good data continuously. That's the key.
The sail drones successfully battled 150-mile-per-hour winds and 50-foot waves inside Hurricane Sam. Its camera recorded it all, while 12 onboard sensors collected data like air and water temperatures, surface pressures, and salinity. The information was reported back in real time and imported right into the forecast models.
That helps improve the models, makes the forecast models better, especially the intensity. We're really aiming at the intensity forecasts.
Foltz says 5 sail drones will be deployed during the heart of hurricane season again this year. With the above-average season expected, we should get plenty of valuable data.
Coming up, there's work you can be doing right now to help your home and property survive a hurricane. Plus,
we may be into something here worse than what we thought. Just keep an eye on us, will you?
Unprepared and unaware, the risk a reporting team took by underestimating Hurricane Andrew's power. Many Floridians will tell you they've been through a hurricane. Yet in fact, very few have experienced the full force of a direct hit from a major Cat 5 storm like Andrew. One person who did was NBC News reporter Kerry Sanders. Like thousands of others, Kerry underestimated Andrew's power while covering the storm 30 years ago.
Those brown grasses reflect...
You've seen him reporting for NBC Nightly News,
Lester?
The Today Show, and NBC's Dateline, from the west to the east.
The center of power in Washington.
But Kerry Sanders may be best known for what he covers down south, especially hurricanes.
That's hours upon hours upon hours of that sound, and it can really grate on you, especially if this is your first hurricane.
Sanders has been storm chasing for dozens of years, but one gave him the scare of a lifetime.
I gotta tell you, I was an idiot. I should not have been in a car during Hurricane Andrew.
We're asking everybody to get into a position where they can be safe.
He misjudged the magnitude of the storm. As Sanders and his photographer drove north from Homestead, Andrew intensified, slammed to shore, and forced them to ride out the landfall in their news vehicle.
We're underneath Metro Rail. The winds are gusting outside our car up to 165 miles per hour. The car is shaking as if there were 10 people on either fender bouncing it up and down.
Nothing short of a life-changing experience and a lesson of survival. What occurs to me is that the people of the Tampa Bay area have never been through anything remotely as bad as Hurricane Andrew. Yet I bet there's a lot of people who think they've been through a big hurricane. But we haven't had a truly disastrous hurricane hit here in 100 years.
I was the Tampa Bay resident that you're talking about today who believes I've been through hurricanes before. I had been through hurricanes before. I'd been through Hugo. I figured, well, if I could survive Hugo, what's this one gonna be like? Every hurricane's different. And this one, you know, Andrew, it was hell.
In Florida, you hear people speak in terms of before Andrew and after Andrew. It's no wonder Hurricane Andrew changed everything, including, as meteorologist Lee Spann tells us, the way we construct our homes and businesses.
In the years after Andrew, building codes changed and continue to improve here in Florida to withstand the hurricanes we know will come in the future.
So it's connected 3 feet underground all the way through the top of the structure altogether, so it stays right here. It won't move.
Tim Jones is a Tampa contractor, and he's renovating his own older home, bringing it up to current code.
Since Andrew, we've gone through 7 revisions.
From years he spent in ministry for disaster relief, Jones saw firsthand what happens to homes not refitted with code improvements.
When Katrina came through Mississippi was that we didn't have flood issues necessarily, but the roofs were getting ripped off the house because the windows were getting blown out, and then the houses were just destroyed.
Improvements in the last 30 years mean that Florida homes should withstand 150-mile-per-hour winds.
So the Florida Building Code we kind of portray as the model for the rest of the country, especially from wind protections.
Dr. Ian Giamenko with Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety explains that current codes are meant to protect a home from wind. The idea is to tie the roof to the walls and all the way down to the foundation.
Think about like all the hurricane clips themselves that hold the roof trusses to the wall connections, all the way down to structural elements that tie the walls to the foundations.
These codes should keep the home standing. Using the IBHS Wind Lab, Giamenko only sees a few areas where damage can be lessened with some improvements to things like shingles and siding. But no matter how well a home is built, rising water is the enemy.
Not just your house getting through the wind, you have to be ready to get through the flooding as well.
National Hurricane Center Director Ken Graham agrees that post-Andrew building codes make us more prepared, but storm surge is still devastating.
When it comes down to preventing major structural damage from the water element, which if you think about water, it's a lot more massive than wind, so it can push a lot harder on a structure, there's not a whole lot we can do.
Here in Florida, building codes work on a 3-year cycle, and adoption can take up to 6 years. In 2021, the code changed to include a sealed roof deck underneath shingles to keep the water out.
Could changes in global climate be causing bigger, stronger, and more severe storms? We'll explain the role of climate change in storm development next. In Tampa Bay, even weaker hurricanes and tropical storms can be deadly. Coming up, what makes our region much more vulnerable. We'll be right back with more Surviving the Storm. As our oceans and atmosphere continue to get warmer due to human-caused climate change, hurricanes get stronger and cause more damage, making our coastlines and our infrastructure more vulnerable. Hurricanes Maria, Michael, and Dorian. Brutal storms in what have been brutal recent hurricane seasons. But is it just coincidence, or is it climate change? Professor Brian Soden from the University of Miami says there are things that we know with great certainty, like sea level rise means more storm surge flooding, and warmer air means heavier rain.
As the climate warms, the atmosphere becomes more humid. That provides more moisture to be converted into rainfall. So not only do you get a greater threat of storm surge, but when tropical cyclones come on land, there's also an increase in the intensity of rainfall.
Case in point, Hurricane Harvey. Studies found that climate change made the rain much heavier. But Soden says the rest is more complicated. Finding climate change-driven trends in storm number and intensity is tough due to a short historical record and computer models that are not quite up to the task yet. But some studies have been able to shed some light. A 2020 NOAA study found that storms today, as compared to 40 years ago, have a much better chance of becoming major cyclones, Cat 3s, 4s, and 5s. And 2 papers published this spring support that conclusion. One examined the climate change connection through 2050.
In most places, the probability of experiencing severe tropical cyclone conditions more than double compared to the 1980-2017 climate conditions.
Is there any chance that this is just kind of natural variability and that this is not climate change?
The bulk of the change really comes from, well, the climate change, the oceans warming.
This matters because damage increases exponentially as the winds increase. And while it may seem to follow that warmer water should also mean more storms, much of the research shows the opposite. A warmer climate may mean less storms, but the storms that form will pack a bigger punch. 30 years ago, it was Hurricane Andrew's tremendous winds that caused so much devastation here in South Florida. But the geography of the Tampa Bay area makes it even more vulnerable. Here's meteorologist Rebecca Berry with more.
Storm surge. It's the most deadly and damaging aspect of a hurricane. It's what our new evacuation zones are based on. 3 factors make the Tampa Bay area more vulnerable to storm surge damage than most areas.
The first factor that makes the Tampa Bay area so incredibly susceptible to storm surge damage actually begins miles and miles from our shores. The shallow slope of the Gulf gives storm surge more time to build higher before reaching our coastline.
Storm surge is basically, it needs to feel the bottom of the ocean. So in the case of the east coast of Florida, it doesn't feel the bottom of the ocean until you're right at landfall. Whereas on the west coast of Florida, it begins to feel the bottom of the ocean well offshore, which means it's got time to build up as it approaches the coast.
Once the storm surge does arrive along our coastline, depending on the approaching angle of the storm, the shape of our bay could funnel surge exponentially higher in our bay, resulting in catastrophic flooding.
Low-lying areas, you just look at the elevation data, you look at the city, and you look at the shape of the coastline, you look at all the inlets, rivers, and lakes. The water is going to go far inland in a storm surge situation, not just in the bay, but it's going to filter all through any nook and cranny. It's going to go well inland in any rivers, so it's incredibly vulnerable, those low-lying areas.
The part of Tampa that makes it so desirable, so gorgeous, so beautiful is what makes it also so vulnerable.
Something important to remember, storm surge is not limited to the coastline. Communities along our beautiful inland waterways are also vulnerable to storm surge.
El Nino and La Nina. These Pacific climate patterns play a great role in hurricane formation. Coming up next, how changes on the other side of the globe affect tropical activity in the Atlantic. El Nino. You've undoubtedly heard meteorologists use this term before. It's a warming of waters in the tropical Pacific Ocean, and that has an influence on Atlantic storms. Hurricane Andrew formed during an El Nino season. Meteorologist Eric Stone explains El Nino, La Nina, and what that means for the upcoming hurricane season.
You might have heard of El Nino and La Nina, but what does it mean for the Bay Area? I'm here to tell you. During an El Nino year, we typically see warmer than average ocean temperatures in the Pacific, and that equates to more wind shear in the Atlantic basin and fewer hurricanes. But this year, it's a little bit different. We're actually expecting a La Nina season, a weak one at that, but still with cooler than average temperatures in the tropical and equatorial Pacific, we are expected to see less wind shear, which will equate to more tropical storm and hurricane formation, as well as warmer water temperatures in the Atlantic basin. Now, over the past 30 years, there have been 34 hurricanes during El Nino seasons. Of course, the big one 30 years ago, Hurricane Andrew. Now, La Nina years, well, we see 3 times as many, almost 100 in fact, and that's what we could expect this season, a weak La Nina.
We'll be right back. The Cape Florida Light has been keeping silent watch over Biscayne Bay for nearly 200 years. All that time, the 96-foot brick tower has guided sailors, smugglers, and pirates alike around the Great Florida Reef. The light has seen a lot of storms and a lot of history. The tower withstood dozens of hurricanes, including the Cat 4 Great Hurricane of 1926 and a clash with Hurricane Andrew 66 years later. Built when Spain handed Florida over to the U.S., the site was also the launching point for slaves escaping to the British Bahamas on the Saltwater Railroad. But the greatest threat came in 1836 during the Second Seminole War. A band of Native Americans shot up the place and set fire to the tower, with the keeper and his helper inside. When his helper died, the keeper tossed a powder keg down into the flames, hoping the explosion would end his life too. Yet, he lived to tell his survival story. Back in service, the light continues to watch and wait for the next chapter. Thank you so much for joining us here on Key Biscayne. Now is the time to put together your hurricane plan so you and your family can survive the next storm that comes your way. Have a safe and healthy hurricane season. For the entire Max Defender 8 weather team, I'm Jeff BERARDELLI.